Hey guys, welcome back to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I am back inside, but not because the weather is bad, but it's because everybody's mowing their lawn outside because actually it's beautiful out. But I will hopefully be out again over the next few days, but just right now, everyone is out and mowing the lawn. So, welcome to Bible 365. If you have never been here before, today is your first day. Welcome. I'm excited that you are here. I'm hoping you're here because you have an interest in reading your Bible or hearing about the Bible. Maybe you love Jesus, maybe you don't know Jesus, and so this has an interest to you. And so I am literally reading through every page of the Bible, and then I am just making comments and my thoughts and my ideas and maybe some personal stories I share that affect anything that goes on in the Bible. So I am using the 1-year Bible online reading plan. So it's 1yearbibleonline.com. And I'm using the chronological Bible reading plan. So it starts on January 1st and it goes obviously all the way through December 31st. And it goes through the Bible in chronological order. So for most of you who just have a regular Bible, this is not going to be in the same order as your Bible. Download the reading plan. Look at the date that's on there. Today's date is May 27th. And so look at the date that's on there. Nope, it is May. I have the date wrong. It's May 28th. So look at the date that's on there. Read that first. Come back and listen. And then, of course, if you come back, listen, and you like what you hear, you feel blessed by it, I want you to like the channel. I want you to share it with other people and subscribe to the channel. Cling the bell so you guys get your notifications every day. Because I come back every day and I read every day and go over this. So today we are in the book of Proverbs. So we started yesterday. Yeah, today's not the first day. I just wanted to make sure. We started yesterday and we started with recognizing who it is. It is King Solomon who is writing these Proverbs. So he doesn't write all of them, but he writes a huge majority of them. King Solomon is the king. This is around about 950 BC. So before Christ even came. This is about 950 to 1,000 years before that. And he is king over all of Israel, extra portions. So it's literally the area of Israel, but it's also so many other places outside that, places that King David, his father, conquered. And now they're all under the banner of King Solomon. They're not necessarily all Israelites, but all Israelites do live in there. And so we do have people from the 12 tribes all in there, and he's still king over all the 12 tribes. So he's speaking to his sons. So he's the king, right? And so there's very likely a chance that his son is going to be ruler of the kingdom after that. This is a promise that was made by God that as long as these sons follow in the footsteps of the Lord, right? So if they follow his decrees and his laws, then there will always be a successor from Solomon's house on the throne, right? He promised it to David originally, and then he made the promise to Solomon after that. Of course, they do need to follow the Lord. So these can't be people who are turning away from the Lord. And so Solomon, in the wisdom that he was given from God, so to go off on a slight tangent there, when Solomon first became king, he asked God. God said, hey, what can I give you? What do you need for this kingdom? And he asked for wisdom. And so God was obviously thrilled with that. And then because he asked for wisdom, he gave him an abundance of wisdom. And beyond wisdom, he gave him blessings of finances, blessings of peace, blessings of prosperity, right? Like all of these things. So he gave him all those things because wisdom was the thing that he asked for. So he is currently what most would consider the wisest man that ever lived, right? So right now on earth, he's the wisest man on earth. To prove that he is the wisest man on earth, people from all over are coming to him with their problems. So not just because he's king, but because he's so wise. So they get people like the Queen of Sheba came to him. She's not in the tribe of Israel, right? But she came to him. The Pharaoh of Egypt married his daughter off to him, right? So there are people who recognize him beyond and outside just the land of Israel. He's made an impact on the world. So it's not just that. So he has had all these proverbs, right? All of these tidbits of wisdom, and he's written them down for us so we can read. Not all of them seem to make it into the pages of the Bible, but a lot of them did. And so that's what we're reading about. So we're sort of continuing, and he's speaking to his sons who are going to eventually take over the kingdom. One, a few, whatever, we'll see what they are, what happens after this. But but there's pretty much a guarantee that one of them is going to take on the land of Israel. So he wants them to be wise. And on top of that, we want our children to be wise. Like, we give them advice because we don't want them to make the same mistakes that we made. We remember that they hurt us, right? So coming from a very practical, non-biblical, non-godly thing, right? Like, if you are a parent, or if you are somebody that's older and recognizes you have a niece or a nephew or a grandchild or right, like whatever this might be, you have somebody that might be younger than you, or even a friend, and you want to give them wisdom because you can see that they're going down a way that could be dangerous, or you want to prevent them from even going down that way, right? Like, so you want to keep all these barriers up in place to protect them. This is what Solomon is doing. Solomon's like, sons, listen to me. And I'm going to venture a guess that they weren't following completely, right? That there was already some stuff going on, because the reality of it is most of us have some stuff going on. And so he is calling them, and he is trying to draw them back in with his wisdom. So here we go. 6 minutes of that. Here we go. We're starting in Proverbs 5. Today, I don't even think I gave you our reading. I'm sorry. Today's reading is Proverbs 5 through 7. Yesterday, we did 1 through 4. So he starts out like he started out every chapter at this point. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Turn your ear to my words of insight, so that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. So I want you to listen to me so you can maintain discretion. This doesn't seem to be, and I don't want to be like, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh, the sign of the times is so awful. This doesn't seem to be something that's valued in our times, right? Discretion. It doesn't seem to be something that's valued. We kind of, I want to say, throw everything up. We talk all the time, right? We're loud, we're bold, and I'm one of those people, by the way. I don't want to even be shy about it. We share all of our insights and our thoughts and our every single thing inside of us. We share it on the internet, right? Like, and again, I'm going to say I'm one of those people, right? So discretion, we don't seem to hold too much of, and that's actually something that's valued. To be discreet has value, because he wants him to maintain that discretion. And so now he's going back to the adulterous woman. And so I want to hit on this a little bit, because I think this is really the first time there's a lot of talk about the adulterous woman. This isn't the only time we've heard it so far, and we're going to continue to hear it. And so Solomon really puts an image into what I believe is figurative language. So I think there's some literal aspects to it, and there's some figurative aspects to it. So, and I'm going to go back to understand that. So first, let's go literal, because very obviously, adultery is a big issue. Certainly, if you get married and you make a covenant with another person, breaking that covenant and going outside of that covenant is really dangerous. So there's obviously always the idea of forgiveness and reconciliation, but there's trouble when that happens, right? So now, that's what God, the thought of what God is putting, or God through Solomon is putting into our heads, that you're married, you're in a covenant with someone, and so you don't want to break that covenant. And in order to not break that covenant, you can't even look in another direction. So one of the things is, he's saying this adulterous woman is calling to them, right? Like, she is. So here it says, the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey. So she looks so sweet. She's saying these really good things, right? So maybe she's complimenting you, right? There's something like seductive about her. Remember, all the way back in the Garden of Eden, the serpent said to Eve, he didn't really say, right? Like, so when he asked her what God told him, he didn't really say, right? And so he was kind of guiding her into being adulterous, right? Into turning away from the Lord. And he was using it by dripping sweet words. Like, he doesn't want you to have the same powers that he had, right? So he was giving Eve a little bit of what she desired, right? And he was kind of allowing that to grow, to fester and to grow. The adulterous woman will do the same thing. So again, very literal. We can go very literal that there's attraction and there's looking on someone. So we can go literal with this. I believe it's a parable, and he goes into more parables to help us understand that the adulterous woman is turning away from the Lord, right? So there's wisdom that is the Lord, and then there's adulterous woman, the prostitute, he calls her a few times, that is the turning away from the Lord. And I'm going to explain maybe a little bit more what I mean in some of these verses. But I think that this is a figurative language he's using. When we are following the Lord, which Solomon's sons are, right? These are Israelites. So these are people who have a relationship with the Lord. If they're following him and they're listening to him and they're doing what he says, they're being wise, they're showing wisdom. If they are not, they're being drawn into evil and wickedness, right? They're being adulterous. They're cheating on the covenant that they made with the Lord. And so that covenant that they made, in 1 Kings 8:23, this is the speech that Solomon gives. And he says, the Lord gave this covenant in love, right? So this is a love covenant, which again is something that we would call marriage, right? So when you get married, it's because you generally, not always, right? Sometimes there's arranged marriages, but where we live here in the United States, a covenant is a relationship between two people who love each other. So they love each other and they decide, you know what? I want to live with you forever, right? So all of our time on this earth from here on out, it's going to be together because you are the person for me. And so we're going to make a pact. I mean, covenant is obviously the easy word to use. So we're going to agree, right? On paper, we're going to agree that it's going to be you and I, gangbusters forever and ever, no matter what comes, right? And so this is what God does with us. He says, I am with you. I am giving you of myself no matter what comes because I love you. I'm going to give you to myself. And then we have this sort of, in some ways, other side of the covenant that we are giving to him. And so when we follow his wisdom, we are honoring our covenant. When we turn to the sweet, dripping honey, adulterous woman, we are turning away from our covenant. And so I see this as this picture. Leviticus, there were a few things in Leviticus. Leviticus 20 is one of them where they talk about the penalty for adultery with the Israelite people is death. So when they are caught in any kind of adulterous relationship, or if anyone comes forward, a couple of witnesses come forward and they say that there was an adulterous relationship, both of them are put to death. Both parties that were in the adulterous relationship are put to death. So it's a serious crime to have been caught in an adulterous relationship in the nation of Israel. In Numbers 5, if you guys remember, if you were with me back then and you remember Numbers 5, this was where if a man accused his wife of being adulterous, she would go in, she would drink whatever herbal drink that was. And according to the judgment of the Lord, if she could have babies after that, she was free and clear. She wasn't an adulterous woman. If she was barren after that, that meant she was adulterous. So there was a punishment of barrenness if she was adulterous against her husband, right? So God takes the covenant between humans, between people, very, very seriously. And I think it's because it's a reflection of the covenant that we have with him, right? He always honors his covenant. We're the ones that consistently turn away. And so he takes these things very seriously. And so this is why I think Solomon, in his wisdom, is giving a picture story because we're so thick-headed and it's hard for us to understand. So he's giving us a picture story. Do not turn to her. She is beautiful. She's going to offer you a lot of stuff. She's going to say really sweet words to you. And I'm saying she because they're using the adulterous woman because he's talking to his sons. He's not talking to his daughters. He's talking to his sons. For women, we have the ability to do the same thing. So make no mistake that this isn't exclusive to men alone. He's using a picture story for men that he's speaking to because that's his audience. But the thoughts are the same, right? So turning away is both a male and female problem. All right. And then so he says, listen to me. So he wants his sons to keep listening to him and looking at him. Because he says this girl who's dripping with honey, that her steps lead straight to the grave. So she might look good on paper, but the reality is, right? So that you might be enticed by these certain lovely things. But the reality is anything away from God is leading to death. In verse 9, it says, if you follow this, you're going to lose your honor to others and your dignity. And you're going to lose this to someone who is cruel. So again, they look good, but they're not. The serpent gave Eve what she wanted, right? He told her the things she wanted, but then their punishment was death, right? And death for the entire human race from here until Jesus comes back again. In verse 15, it says, so again, he's kind of going from one picture story to another picture story. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares, right? This is like, don't give up anything that you have and don't take anything that isn't yours. And quite often they keep using the expression of your neighbor's wife. But may your, verse 18, may your fountain be blessed. So you're blessing your things, your covenant between you and your spouse, right? If you honor that by staying on the straight and narrow, and of course the covenant between you and God. And then it says in verse 21, for your ways are in full view of the Lord. He sees it and he examines all your paths. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline, these people are going to die. So I looked up discipline. We all know discipline. Most of us hate discipline. I know I hate discipline. Like I am a very unorganized person by nature. And so anytime, I may have shared this story before, but my husband and I used to argue over the car keys all the time because I would walk in the door and boop, they would drop wherever they needed to drop. And that was it. And so I would lose them constantly. And then, of course, the older you get, well, the further into the 2000s you get, these cars have crazier and crazier keys. So it would go from this little tiny key that could cost you $10 to redo to a $120 key. And now it's a key fob that you don't even hold in your hands as you walk in the door. So how easy is it to lose a set of keys? And so the discipline was, is you would walk in the door and you would hang your keys on the hanger. And so it was like consistent every day. Hang your keys, hang your keys, hang your keys. And I fought it for years. And now, because I have not lost keys in a really long time, I consistently have to tell my daughter, when you come in, hang your keys, right? Because it's this discipline that keeps everything from being outrageous and chaotic. And it's one of those things that for most of us, not all of us, but most of us tend to push against discipline. It's one of the things that you hear people kind of saying when they are very anti-Christian, right? They're like, oh, this is just a whole bunch of rules that certain people want us to follow to be just like them. And that's not at all what it is, right? So discipline in definition is training people to obey rules. Really hard. And then it says, and it says then punishment for disobedience. So it is ugly by definition, which by the way, I don't know if we should think that, but it feels like it's ugly. So you're training us. What are we, dogs? You're training us, but that's what we need. We need training. You are no longer, like when you were a baby, you needed to be trained to read. When you were an adult, you needed to be, or when you got older, you needed to be trained to do math. We needed to be trained to do the job that we're doing, right? I need training all the time to be able to do that. I just went to a training a couple of days ago. So I need to do trainings all the time. Those we seem to think is fine. I'm a trainer. I train people fitness for a living. But for some reason, we fight against these godly obedience rules. And we say that we don't want that kind of training. Don't push me on that kind of training. I'm not, So, but this is what he says that we're supposed to be doing. So as a human, what we need to do is we need to recognize that training is good for us and we need to be trained in the ways of the Lord. All right, so moving on to Proverbs 6. This is a lot of similar verbiage. So again, he's talking to his son. If you've put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, so these are kind of bad things. If you've been trapped by what you said and ensnared by the words of your mouth, do this to free yourself. So it looks like what they're doing is they are borrowing money or giving money. So I feel like it's one of the two things. And they're not supposed to be doing that. Really, in general, and one of the things that he said back in Leviticus, like you're not really you're not lending, or if you lend, you're not lending with interest, especially to those of the kingdom, right? You're not really supposed to be borrowing from people. So we're really supposed to be doing this all on its own. And I'm following that up because in verse 6 it says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard." So whoever this person is, whatever, if it's one of his sons that's doing this, or just again he's preparing them that don't do this, they're using money that's not their own. And he's like, go get out and work. Like, look at the ant. The ant does this all the time. Consider his ways and be wise. It has no commander or overseer, but it stores up its provisions in the summer. So it prepares for itself, right? The ant doesn't mess around. It doesn't borrow from other people, right? It doesn't buy things that it can't buy. It doesn't do any of those things. It stores up its food for the summer when it can't, and then it eats what it has in plenty because of the work it did at another time. And so it's giving this information for a son to make sure they're providing for themselves and they're not getting themselves in a bad spot. And then it moves down to verse 12 where it says a troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks a malicious eye, right? These are the things that God hates. So you're getting yourself in this bad place and doing these bad things. Following with 16, it says, 6 things the Lord hates, which is an expression, by the way. 6 things he hates, 7 things he finds detestable. And then in verse 19, I feel like it sums it up that it says, a person who stirs up conflict in the community. So a troublemaker. And what is a troublemaker? Somebody that's arrogant, because it says haughty eyes, but like that's arrogant. So somebody that's arrogant, they lie, they shed innocent blood, they divide wickedness. And we are in some ways drawn to some of those things. Again, I bring up the serpent, right? We're drawn to some of those things. We allow the troublemaker to come in and to kind of steer us and guide us and say some wicked things. And it says then, following up, it says, but keep your father's command and don't forsake your mother's teaching. So here we go. Now I want you, all this stuff it's going to come up to you, right? But I want you to remember these things that you've been taught. Our kids are not always going to be with us. We have to prepare them for going out to where they're going to go. Somebody has to continue to prepare us. I'm in my 40s. Somebody that's older than me and that has lived a life longer than me, they're going to come to me with wisdom, right? And I'm going to listen to that wisdom because they've been in these places. They have grandchildren, maybe a lot of them, right? They've lived lives. Maybe they're retired at this point and they have information that they can share with me in my age and my generation. And I should be listening to those things. So he says, bind them always on your heart. And again, this is an expression. Just keep them close. Remember them so they come up when you're in these situations. And so it says, and then of course it follows up with the your neighbor's wife. So one of the things that I wanted to note here is like all these commands and just thinking of children. In my own personal life, one of the things that I always wanted to do, so I did a lot of stuff when I was young. Like I partied, I did all kinds of things. And then as an adult, I became a believer and then I started following the Lord. And then it was a very slow, by the way, very slow process for me. This was not like, oh, I believed on the Lord and then I became this angel. I'm still nowhere near an angel. I still sin way more than I would like to. However, slowly but surely, I've gotten closer and closer and closer to the Lord and obeying his commands and recognizing the things I want from him. And yet there's still a piece of my heart that wants my kids to experience things that I'm like, they can let them go to a couple of bars, let them watch a couple of movies. Like I watched that movie growing up. It's not that big of a deal. And so there's this, like, in some ways maybe in some ways I should take out some ways. There's a wickedness in my heart that I don't want them to be safe and protected, and that I kind of want them to be like the rest of the world. And so there's still even a piece of me that fights against this instruction. And so it's something that I need to sort of bind onto my heart, that I need to recognize that God is not doing this to punish my kids, that God is doing this because he actually loves my kids better than I do. And so I'm trying to usurp what God's doing by saying it's not that big of a deal, right? And I've got to go back and I've got to be like, what's most important is what the Lord wants for my children, right? And really focusing on those things for my kids to live that kind of life. All right, so moving on, here we go. It says, so going back to that, like keeping you from your neighbor's wife. So he goes in verse 24, he says, keeping you from your neighbor's wife, from the smooth talk of a wayward woman. Do not lust in your heart after her beauty, right? So it says, then it's saying for a prostitute. So again, I feel like this is in some ways a parable or a play on words. A prostitute can be had for a loaf of bread. Super cheap. However, a neighbor's wife is going to destroy your life. So there's a difference between the two of them, right? So a prostitute is like, we know what that is. You go in, you have no relationship with that person, and you turn around and walk away. Versus the other where like you're literally turning your whole body towards that and turning away from what you have. And so I think it's an analogy. Sin is momentary, right? Like sin is, we all do it. There are moments where we sin, right? But sinning is different than completely turning away from God and turning towards something else that is a sinful lifestyle. And so this is always something that, even in the hearts of a believer, this is something that we fight this idea all the time. Well, I sin all the time. Does that mean that God doesn't love me? Or they go, well, we all sin, so don't make such a big deal out of it, right? And neither of those two things are true. There's actually a delicate balance between both of them. Yes, we do all sin, but when you sin, are we turning back to the Lord and recognizing our sin and repenting of it? Or are we going, oh, all people sin? Or are we toiling in the fact that, oh my gosh, I sinned, I'm such a sinner, I'm so horrible, God doesn't love me? Or do we recognize that, yes, I sinned, and this gives me an opportunity to tell the Lord how much I regret that and allow him to love on me and forgive me, right? So we have to have these two delicate balances. All right. So then, and again, he uses this other idea. People don't despise a thief if he steals, right? So again, this is a sin, right? That he steals, and they go, well, because you don't have a lot. So there's a recognition there, but there is a payment for that. The payment is that they got to pay back sevenfold. So there's a payment for that. However, a man who commits adultery has no sense. So this is a bigger thing. So you steal, you're going to get punished. You got to turn back and say you're sorry. You turn away by being adulterous to the Lord, that's death, right? Has no sense. So it doesn't even have sense for them. And then it says in verse 34, jealousy arouses a husband's fury. Again, I'm going to say that this is about the Lord. So the Lord is a jealous God. He wants you, and he says it all the time. No other gods but me. Turn to no one but me. Okay, and then Proverbs 7, this is our last sort of warning. Well, this is our last chapter for today. And again, it's another warning about immoral women. So my son, keep my words, store up my commands within you. Keep my commands, and you will live. So life with commands, death with the adulterous woman. He says, at the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. Again, this is, I'm going to say another parable, another story. And I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men. Simple and young men. These are people who are, young man obviously is somebody who doesn't have a lot of age, right? They're younger, so they don't know as much. They don't have as much wisdom as an adult. Simple is sort of the same thing. They're lacking in knowledge. So literally lacking in knowledge, lacking in wisdom. They're a little more innocent. They don't have a greater understanding of certain things. And so he's looking at his window and he sees these things. And then he sees a woman and she comes to him. So this is the story. So this either young man or simple man, whatever it is he's walking down the street innocently, minding his own business. And here comes this woman and she kind of entices him. She draws him into her house, right? She says, oh, my husband's not home, right? So this is obviously the adulterous woman. And then he follows her. So because he's innocent and he's lacking wisdom, he doesn't have that foundation or boundaries, then he doesn't understand, and he goes and he follows her. And then it says he's going like in verse 22, all at once he followed her like an ox going to slaughter. That's serious. An ox doesn't realize it's going to go get killed. And so it's the same thing. So this young, simple man is going to go and it's going to be the death of him. So it is beyond just a momentary issue. Right? This is going to draw him in and this is going to pull him away from God. And then finishing up with 24, now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. So my listener, whoever is listening here, pay attention. These are the words of Solomon, one of the wisest men that have ever lived. I always say one of. I believe we consider him the wisest, not necessarily the smartest, the wisest man that ever lived, knowing the heart of God and sharing that with the rest of the world. Listen to what he says. Do not let your heart turn to the adulterous woman's wicked ways or stray onto her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. So people have turned people away from God all the time. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. With the Lord there is life. Without the Lord there is death. So that's where we're ending today. I'm hoping you take some of this with you. I'd love to hear your comments as always. And then again, if you this was blessing to you, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And in the meantime, keep reading.